So I'm willing to bet that you're here right now watching this video because you need some help with GED writing. What gave it away? Well, I figured that you saw the picture and you saw the title of this video and you figured it was going to be about me breaking down a GED test taker's writing. And if that's what you thought, then you're right. So thank you for being here. My name's Parker if you're new here, and I make videos to help GED test takers pass the GED fast so they can move on to bigger and better things in life. And if you're into that, please hit subscribe down below and turn on your notification bell. So today in this video, I am going to be breaking down another real GED writing example that a real GED student sent me. So I'm excited to break this down because I'm really hoping that this is going to help you. Seeing an example of this person's writing, this is going to help you learn how to do a better job on the GED essay so that you can pass with a higher score on GED RLA. So we're going to skip the prompt today because the prompt is not important. Basically, all you need to know is that it's a typical GED writing prompt. So you got one author who's wrote a passage and they're trying to persuade you that their position's correct, and the other person is, of course, countering that and they're trying to persuade you that their position is correct. So first, let's start off by reviewing the 5-paragraph essay format. Now, to get a perfect score or even to get a high score, you need to know how to use this format here. So you start off by writing an introductory paragraph. Next, you're going to write 3 body paragraphs, and you're going to end with a conclusion. Now you want to aim to use between 3 to 7 sentences per paragraph. So if you've seen my essay review videos before, then you've probably seen me cover that 5-paragraph essay format. But it doesn't matter if you've seen it once or seen it 10,000 times, you really cannot see that enough. So I want you to really memorize that 5-paragraph essay format. I want you to sink it so deep in your memory that you could practically say it in your sleep, because it really is your key to acing the essay. So when you write your 5-paragraph essay introduction, you want to start off with a topic sentence. You then want to state both of the author's positions, and you can do this in one sentence or you can do it in 2 separate sentences. Now, the most important part of the 5-paragraph essay is to give your own claim about which position is best supported by the evidence. So let's take a look at your introductory paragraph. So you start off by saying, the topic of restricting internet in the workplace has become a big issue. So the only thing to think about here is that in between restricting and internet, you'd want to put the word the, so you'd want to say the topic of restricting the internet in the workplace. Not a big issue, just something to think about here. So looking at your second sentence, you say, Justine Simmons, the CEO of a company, believes that internet in the workplace needs to be limited. So I have a few notes for you on this one. So first, let's review from the reading. And we see that the name is actually Justine Timmons with a T. And Justine is the CEO of Niagara Equipment Corp. So why does this matter? Well, you should know that the GED essay is going to be graded by a computer system. And it's my theory that the computer system is going to look for certain keywords and phrases from the passages. So for things like people's names or anything that's very specific that is in the passage, you want to just make sure that you spell that exactly correct, because the computer algorithm may be grading your essay and looking for certain keywords to be in there. So you want to make sure that you get those names spelled correctly. So right now it's just practice, so it's okay to make mistakes, but something that I want you to think about so that you can get a fully maximized score on the real test. Okay, so we keep going here, and so we have Justine Simmons, the CEO of a company, and you could really say the CEO of Niagara Equipment Corp instead of saying the CEO of a company, but the way you have it's okay. So you say believes that internet in the workplace needs to be limited. So I'm not going to keep beating a dead horse on that, but I would say believes that the internet, so I would put the word the in there, or you could say believes that internet use in the workplace needs to be limited, something like that. So we'll keep moving here, but the main thing that I want to point out is that you say in the workplace needs to be limited. So I'm really glad that you made this mistake, because this is something that I've seen in the last few essays that I've covered, and this is the passive voice error. So we want to make sure that we put this into the active voice rather than into the passive voice. And it's a little bit of a confusing topic here, so let me try to explain this in the simplest way possible. So basically, active voice makes it clear who's acting, and in an active sentence, the person or agency that's acting is our subject. Now, in a passive sentence, the subject isn't clear. So I want you to think about what I mean by this here, and let's take a look at your sentence here. So first, I have the way that you wrote it. I have Justine Simmons, the CEO of a company, believes that internet in the workplace needs to be limited. Now, here's just an idea of how you could change it around. So in my version, which is the second version, I say Justine Simmons, the CEO of a company, believes that the company should limit internet use in the workplace. So that way it's clear who's limiting the internet in the workplace, right? So we always want to ask the question, who's doing it? So in your example here, you have in the workplace needs to be limited. So my question for you would be by who? Who's limiting it? And in this case, it's the company. So I've just rearranged the sentence a little bit to put it into the active voice. Okay, so as we keep reading here, you say, Honoria Bell and her colleagues, however, argue that internet in the workplace should be free to access. So I highlighted this in yellow because we see the same issue here. So when you say should be free to access, my question that I want you to think about is free for who? Who's accessing it, right? Now, so we could change the sentence around to make it clear that it's the workers or that it's her colleagues, right? So we could say something like, Honoria Bell and her colleagues argue that they should have unrestricted access to the internet in the workplace. That's something I just made up off the top of my head, but just keep in mind here that we always want to try to write in the active voice, and the passive voice, it's not always wrong. Sometimes you'll see in books where the authors choose to write that way, but for a test like this that's going to be graded, we want to try to keep it in the active voice as much as possible. So then you go on, let's look at your ending here. So you say, Honoria's argument is the better supported one because she uses multiple sources of evidence as well as named experts and a response to Justine's problems by presenting better solutions. So I underlined Justine's because I just want to give you something else to think about here. So the way you did it is not wrong. I don't think you'd be penalized for it on the test. But typically when we see essay writing, usually the first time an author's name is brought up, we see the first and the last name, and then after that, students or people who are writing, they'll typically just refer to that person by their last name. So they might say Bell instead of Honoria after the first time they introduce her, or the same thing for Timmons, I think her name is. For Justine Timmons, they might just say Timmons. And so the way you've set this up, you're saying Justine and you're saying Honoria. And like I said, that's okay. Just something to think about though, just something to think about that you could do it by the last name. That's how it's typically done, but you didn't necessarily do anything wrong. I just wanted to draw that to your attention. So overall, I think this first paragraph is great. The way you've laid it out is very strong. You've got the topic sentence. You're telling me what both of those two authors' positions are, and you're clearly telling me which position you're going to argue is best supported. So overall, great job with your first paragraph. Okay, so in your first body paragraph, you start off with a good transition word. You say firstly. I've seen other students use first instead of saying firstly, but either way is correct, however you want to do it. So you say firstly, Justine's argument is mostly filled with opinion, and she cites only one named source to support her view. So you're starting off the body paragraph with a topic sentence, and then you're going to explain what you mean by that topic sentence throughout the rest of the paragraph. So you say, in contrast, another good transition phrase, Honoria gives multiple examples of evidence. She starts off by saying that there is more to that salary.com statistic than you cite than meets the eye. This is a strong point because it weakens Justine's argument by proving that she used only a portion of the statistic to advance her view. So I've highlighted this portion here just to give you a little word choice to think about here. So it's not wrong. I just want to think about a little bit of a stylistic thing here to clarify this a little bit. So when you say only a portion, I'd probably say only a small portion instead, just because the word portion just means a part of a whole, right? So just the word portion itself, that means a part of a whole, but it doesn't necessarily tell us if that portion is large or small. So I would say only a small portion here. It just makes it a little bit more clear. But like I said, the way you have it's not wrong. Just want to give you a stylistic thing to think about here. So then you say, Honoria then goes on to cite the rest of this statistic, proving her point. So I really like what you're saying here. I really actually do like this paragraph. I think you did a great job with it. I really like your thinking and the argument that you're making here. But the thing is that as a reader, I want to know more here, right? So you want to assume that the reader has not read the passages, right? So when you say Honoria goes on to cite the rest of the statistic, I would want to know a little bit more. So I think you could explain what Honoria says in her passage a little bit more here. So just one way to make this a little bit stronger here would be to just explain exactly what you mean, right? So when you say Honoria goes on to cite the rest of the statistics, so you're telling me what happens here, but you're not showing me. So the difference, what I mean by telling versus showing, is that you're telling me Honoria cites the rest of the statistic, proving her point, right? So what I'd want you to do, maybe add in another quote or just explain a little bit more about this whole issue here, because I really think that this issue here that you're hitting on about only citing part of the statistic, I really think that's a really good issue. It's a really good point that you're bringing up here. So I think you could actually consider framing this whole paragraph just around that fact that Justine didn't use the whole statistic here. But overall, you did a really strong job with this first paragraph. Like I said, I just want to know a little bit more. I'd just like you to explain a little bit more here. And so let me also tell you let me give you another example of what I mean. So you say, in contrast, Honoria gives multiple examples of the evidence. She starts off by saying that, and I don't think you need this comma here, by the way. So you say, by saying that there's more to Salary.com statistic that you cite that meets the eye, right? So you could, to add an example here, like tell me what that statistic is. Like, what does it say? Like, what specifically is that statistic here? And then just show me. So what is the statistic that Justine's saying here? And then tell me, or show me rather than tell me, what is Honoria's counterargument to that, right? So you're telling me that Honoria goes on to cite the rest of the statistic, but I want you to show me, right? So show me how she does that exactly rather than just telling me here. So it's good to tell me, but I want you to also show me with a quote or just take something else that she says in the passage and put it in your own words here. And I think that would add to an already strong paragraph here. And so then the last sentence or two, you don't necessarily need this here at the end, right? So these last sentences here, I think you could do without this here. And I think that you could really focus this paragraph just around that one point about her, Justine, not using that full statistic, because I think that's a really interesting point. So let's go on now to your second paragraph here, right? So you start off by saying, secondly, Honoria names her sources. This is a mark of a strong argument because it proves that she did not make up her supporting facts. She uses a range of support, including quotes from an author, studies, and statistics. So my idea here was, what if you added an example or two in here, right? An example or two, it could be a quote, it could just be some of the sources she's citing. So, for example, right, in the passage, Honoria cites these two sources, just as two examples. So there's the author, Laura Vanderkam, and then she also cites the National University of Singapore. So those are just two examples of sources that she cites. So again, you're telling me here that she's using that range of support, including quotes from an author, studies, and statistics. So what you're telling me is great, but I also want you to show me too. So I want you to show me how she's doing that, and what I want you to, the way I want you to show me that is by bringing in those examples here, saying, for example, she cites this one author, or for example, she cites this university. And then also, ideally, you'd be able to show me an example of the other passage of Justine making claims without evidence, right? Making claims that are just her opinion. So you go on to say, these diverse resources help to support her argument, not only because of the evidence they present, but also because they prove that her work is credible. This is another strong reason why her argument is the more credible one. So overall, you're doing a great job on the second paragraph. Your formatting is great here. So you start off with that topic sentence, you've got that transition word, and you're explaining to me what you mean. I just think that you could strengthen this a little bit further just by bringing in a specific example or two, and also ideally trying to show me an example of Justine stating something without using that evidence, right? Okay, so let's move on to your third body paragraph. So you start off by saying, furthermore, Honoria does not simply state her argument, but provides a response to the problems that Justine presented. She says that, and again, I don't think that you don't need that comma there with the word that. So she says that one important function of the internet is as a communication tool. She then goes on to say that instead of limiting internet in the workplace and treating us like children, it would be a wiser strategy to hire responsible employees and then demonstrate your trust in them. In addition to this, she gives other solutions to counteract Justine's argument. This is a mark of a stronger argument because she does not ignore the opposition, but rather offers multiple solutions which would be better for both employees and the company. So I had somebody in my last essay, so the last essay review video that I did, that person did something very similar to what you're doing, and in their third point in their third body paragraph, they made the argument that, well, this one author was able to make counter arguments and to counter the points made by the other author, so therefore their position's stronger. So what I want you to think about, though, is so just because Justine is making an argument and just because Honoria is countering those arguments and making a counter argument, does that automatically mean that Honoria's points are stronger? So I don't think it does, right? So it doesn't. And so what I really want you to think about here is rather than just telling me that Honoria is making counter arguments and she's countering the points that Justine makes, right? It's kind of like, if you think about it, it's kind of like, that's the point of the two essays. They're arguing back and forth, or the two passages. The authors are arguing back and forth, and they're both trying to convince you that their position's right. So obviously, they're going to both be trying to counter each other's arguments, right? So what I want you to do, what I want you to think about here, because you're showing me a couple examples here, so I really love the thought process here. So what I want you to think about here, though, is I would just pick one of those main problems. Just pick one main problem and just go deeper into that one problem here, right? Because I think that when you have the more vague your topic sentence is for body paragraph, I think the harder it is to write a good body paragraph. And so, like I said, I just had somebody do something very similar to this, where one of their points that they were arguing was basically that this one author's position is the better position because that person makes better counter arguments. Okay, and so I think that that's the right thinking style, but what I want you to see, what I want to see from your writing, I'd want you to just pick one of those problems, pick one of those points that that Honoria is making a good counter argument against Justine on, and I'd want you to just go deeper into that one issue. So let me just show you a quick example. I just made this up off the top of my head. Let me just show you an example of what I mean and how you could potentially do that. So this is just my example. I say, another example of Honoria's stronger argument is that her explanation about how restricting internet use can harm the workplace. Justine argues that restricting the internet will, quote, promote a positive workplace for all our valued employees. However, Honoria counters this argument by stating that installing an internet filter may create resentment and tempt some employees to find ways around the filter. As an employee of the company, Honoria is more credible than Justine on the issue. And so this isn't the perfect way to do it by any means. I just made this up off the top of my head just to show you an example of what I meant here. So like I said again, I do really like your thought process here. You're using quotes for your points here. I just think that, these points that you're making here, they're separate points here. And so I just think that, rather than just saying that Honoria doesn't simply state her argument but provides a response to the problems that Justine presented, it's kind of, my point here is that that's just kind of like, that's what the test writers want you to do, right? So it's already kind of assumed that Honoria is going to be trying to counter the points that Justine's making. So that's kind of already assumed, so you don't necessarily need to state that. I just want you to, I'd rather you just think of an example of her doing that. So pick one good example here, and you gave me two examples here, right, in your quotes here, right? So the one was when Honoria says, one important function of the internet is as a communication tool, and then also where she says, treating us like children, then also where she says, hire responsible employees and then demonstrate your trust in them. So I'd want you to just pick one of these points, one of these counter arguments that she's making, and think about just going deep. Center your paragraph around that and just try to go deeper into that. And then you go on to say, this is a mark of a strong argument because that does not ignore the opposition, but rather offers multiple solutions that would be better for both the employees and the company. So your thought process is right, and your strategy here is right. So you're doing a lot of things that are right. I just think that if you just explained with a little bit more detail here what you mean exactly, because like what I've been saying throughout your whole essay here, you're telling me all the right things. I just think that you could strengthen it if you just showed me a little bit more with some more examples. And I think that you are trying to do that here. So I do applaud your effort here, and I do applaud what you're trying to do. But I want you to, rather than just putting like quotes in here, I want you to just pick maybe one quote, then give me a few sentences explaining like why you picked that quote and like how that quote strengthens Honoria's position here. Okay, and then the only other thing that I wanted to point out here is where you say, in addition to this, she gives other solutions to counteract Justine's argument. So you just want to put an apostrophe in here between the E and the S, right? So to be honest with you here, so this is only, like I've said, this is only the second time where I've seen a student make one of their body paragraphs about saying basically author A makes better counter arguments to author B's position, so therefore author A's position is the strongest. So I'm not, to be honest, I'm not 100% sure how the computer would grade that on your test. So it's possible that the way that you have this paragraph here is fine and that it would get you a good score. But I'm just telling you what my gut is telling me here. So my gut is just telling me here that you'd want to just try to be more specific rather than just making your point that this author counters the other person. I'd want you to just pick an example of how how the author counters the other author, and just go deeper in the paragraph, just go deeper in explaining to me what you mean exactly. That's just what my gut tells me on this. So just take from that what you will, and do what you think is going to be best for you. But that's just my opinion on this. That's what I would do if I was advising you one-on-one. That's what I would suggest. So just take from that what you will. Okay, so then looking at your conclusion, you say, in conclusion, Honorea's argument is proven to be the better supported and credible one. By using a myriad of evidence, naming those sources, and providing counter-arguments, she builds her argument up and creates a strong stance. So very good choice of words here. I really like what you're saying here. And then your last sentence is, while Justine's argument is based mostly on her opinion. All right, so there's a few things to note here. So firstly, so you say, while Justine's argument, so since it's Justine's argument, right, so she has ownership of that argument, so you'll want to have an apostrophe put in here. And then the other thing is you say, while Justine's argument is based mostly on her opinion. So this is also passive voice here, right? So we'd want to say, well, Justine bases her argument mostly on her opinion, or something like that, so that we don't have this in the passive voice quite so much. But other than that, your conclusion's fine. This is good. You say in conclusion here, which is a good way to start it off. Good transitional phrase. So good work here with your conclusion. Okay, so then let's just talk about some of the pros here. So number one, you shared your writing, and it takes a lot of guts to share your writing. You put your writing out here, and you did a great thing because you were willing to help other people too, because I'm sure there's other people out there that are going to watch this video and that are going to learn from this. So you did a really good job. So thank you for sharing your writing here. Also, you had excellent uses of transition phrases throughout the whole essay. You structured your essay extremely well. There's really nothing I could critique about your structure from the first paragraph through your body paragraphs through your conclusion. And also, you avoided common mistakes, like you didn't bring up anything new in the conclusion. There weren't many grammatical errors. The only thing that I saw here was that apostrophe. I think you had a comma after the word that, but that's not a huge deal. So really, you did a great job here overall with avoiding common mistakes. And so to be honest, I think I had to correct fewer things in this essay. This might be the essay that I actually had to correct the fewest things compared to other essays that I've graded. So great job there. So now let me just talk about your areas to improve on here. So the main advice that I have for you would be, rather than telling so much, you want to also show. And so I've said this multiple times throughout the video, but let me just add in here to emphasize that. What I mean, again, you're telling me all the right things. You're telling me that this author makes a stronger argument, and you're telling me why, but I also want you to show me. So just make sure that you're taking those examples and you're elaborating on those examples. So whenever you tell me this person, Honorea, makes a better argument because she cites sources or whatever it is, then I want you to take those sources and I want you to tell me exactly what they are. So explain to me why that makes the argument better using those examples. So tell me how Honorea makes a better argument, and then show me with examples. And there was some evidence throughout your piece that you do understand then that you are doing that. So there were a couple cases here where you were doing that, but I think that you could do more, and that would strengthen this. So then there were only two other things that I'd want you to think about here. And so one is apostrophes. So you might have just been practicing, and so you might have missed those two apostrophes. But if you are confused about apostrophe rules, then I'd want you to review that. Maybe just search apostrophes on YouTube or on Google, or if you have a prep book, you can look it up in that textbook. But I would just review those rules if you're feeling a little shaky on them. And also just think about writing in active voice rather than passive voice here. So what I'd want you to do here, I'd want you to go check out that video that I made, the last essay review that I did, because I talk a lot about passive versus active voice in that. And also, I'm going to put some links down below to some resources here on YouTube, videos you can watch to learn more about writing in the active voice. And so I think that's really going to help you improve your score. So great work overall on this essay. Thank you for sharing it. I enjoyed reading it. I'm sure this was helpful for other people. So good luck on your test.